Another super feature we recently did about cool new plastic toys. Boing Boing Video, also formerly known as Boing Boing TV. This was my baby. In 2006 and 2007, the agents who represent me in Hollywood were talking with different television networks about me becoming an anchor, a broadcast host, and at the same time there was a lot of excitement in digital media around the idea of video online, the idea that you could create something like a television network without a whole lot of capital, just with a basic understanding of how to produce video and a basic understanding of what people find interesting online. So I ended up turning down an offer to join a very large television network and kind of take a gamble on this with my partners at Boing Boing. And that gamble turned out to be a good one. We have produced hundreds and hundreds of episodes, and we've also worked with other filmmakers and creators from around the world who create work for us or share special things out of their portfolios that haven't been seen before. Some of the episodes included floating in zero gravity with Dr. Buzz Aldrin and the head of the International Space Station. We haven't yet actually gone to the space station or gone into outer space, but there are these things called zero gravity flights where the plane flies in this kind of a pattern, and when you're coming like that, you get microgravity and you float. And the astronauts actually use this in the NASA training program to become accustomed to how to operate in weightlessness. So that was one fun thing. A lot of times when interesting bands come to town, we will interview them. Many of the kinds of things that we're seeing here at Tijuana Innovadora would have been, I'm actually really sorry that I didn't bring a camera crew here. There are so many amazing artists and people crafting and doing interesting things with electronics and open source software. This would be a perfect Boing Boing TV episode. I created this map to show you a partial taxonomy of Boing Boing content. If any of you here in the audience are regular readers, you may recognize some of this. I think maybe Broso the clown should be in there somewhere too. We had some fun with that incident as well. The fact that he was arguing with somebody on Twitter or Facebook was our excuse for getting into this story, but you know, what's not to love about that guy? We've also started doing events. This was the first ever Boing Boing picnic where we invited our readers, our friends, our fans to come to a park in San Francisco. Oh, and they showed up with all of these crazy projects that they'd been working on. We didn't ask people to bring specific things, but it was so magical. You know, we showed up, this place is called Doughboy Meadow. The statue that we've covered up with a Boing Boing t-shirt is actually a very solemn statue dedicated to pilots in World War II. Well, he's wearing a Boing Boing t-shirt now, it's probably still there. We showed up and there were elders, there were children, there were families, there were scientists from Lockheed Martin and Boeing, all in their spare time doing crazy things, and they brought some of them here. This was a big a balloon project that like they can go to the very edge of Earth's atmosphere, go to the edge of space, and they attach cameras to this balloon. They're doing really interesting things. We also had fire eaters, and we had stuffed Cthulhus. So yeah, Virgin America, we've been partnering with them since Boing Boing TV first launched to show these web episodes that we create. And as you can see, like just when you're sitting in the plane, on the seat back, there's a little television, and you can choose to watch, you know, any major American or international television channel through satellite TV, but now you can also choose to watch us. And I mention this not to promote it, but to point out to you how strange a hack that ended up being, that this web television network that we created with very little resources and literally with the help of our friends became something that stands on its own next to very, very, very large media companies. And then the fact that you can watch that while you're flying across the country. I think this airline now flies from a number of major US cities down here to Mexico as well. So perhaps some of you will have the opportunity. And all of this goes, sort of points to the fact that it is possible to create a media business that is it's possible to create a successful media business in which you are chasing what I like to call our happy obsessions rather than chasing page views. Right now in the digital publishing industry in America, there are a lot of shifts happening. Obviously, America has gone through huge economic changes since 2008. And blogs, online publishers are feeling new pressures, and the business of running a blog for profit is very, very different than it once was. But Boing Boing didn't begin as a profit-making enterprise. Boing Boing didn't begin as a business at all. We began as someone's happy obsession, and that someone invited one person after the other to join him. There was a point, I think it was in 2004, when Boing Boing, the website, first became really, really popular. Like we hit this new height of the number of visitors each day that were visiting our site. And we were paying so much out of pocket. I think we were paying like $1,000 each per month to host the website. It was only at that point when we realized that maybe taking ads would be a good thing. But before that, we did this as a labor of love, and the idea that this would someday sustain us or sustain our families and become a business where we'd have other people actually working for us was something that we never imagined. And I can remember my family laughing at me when I first suggested that that might be possible. Now we are a large publisher. We get more page views and more unique views a month than many long-established American newspapers or television channels. The television network that almost hired me back in 2007, I remember the point at which the videos that we were producing online surpassed the number of viewers that they were getting each day. And I felt very, very fortunate, but there's also something, I don't know, it's like beautiful and terrifying at the same time that you can create something on your own that ends up having the same kind of power, the same kind of cultural force as institutions that you may have been brought up all your life to think are the only sources of power, the only sources of trustworthy information. I think that our story also proves that you don't have to chase what is broad. You don't have to chase sort of broad humor and broad topics, something, some form of music or art or some argument that might be popular to the maximum number of people in order to create something that works. Niche, the idea of going after things that might really, really appeal very strongly to a small group of people, is good if that is really what is in your soul. For us, every day when we log on to start doing blog posts on Boing Boing, we don't think about what will drive page views. Maybe that's to our detriment. Maybe we could be 10 times larger and have 10 times the number of employees, or I don't know. Maybe we would have a different kind of success if that is the way that we operated. But the fact that we still wake up every day and comb through conversations that our friends are having on Twitter or interesting things that people have sent us in our inbox or on our submission form, that fascination drives us. Focus groups don't drive us, and the idea that we have to reach a certain number of page views a day doesn't drive us. There was a memo leaked by one of, there's a big online publishing business in the States. This controversial memo leaked out a few months back, and the CEO was quoted as saying that like sex is good and scandal is good, this is to drive page views. And if you can't find one or the other, you should just try to find a sex scandal, better yet. Just combine the two. If you can't find one, go ahead and just try to create one, try to concoct one, see what elements might be out there. The only sex scandal that you're likely to read about on Boing Boing might involve like Sasquatch and a Chewbacca. Actually, that would probably be a pretty good post. We might want to look into that. But you get what I'm saying, I think. Huh, I don't know. Here we go. So yeah, the idea that what is strange, what is different, this is something that can eventually become very successful. And I guess I should just also mention the name of our company, the company that owns Boing Boing and Boing Boing TV, the business is called Happy Mutants LLC. So when we get into a lawsuit or something, if any of you ever want to sue us, you'll be suing Happy Mutants LLC. This has actually led to some interesting experiences. So I think now I want to show you a couple of episodes of Boing Boing video, of Boing Boing TV. Hang on just a moment before you start. One thing that I would like to share with you. So my adoptive father, his people are from Guanajuato. He's lived in the US all of his life, but I was raised from my teen years on, spending a lot of time in Guatemala, Mexico, other Latin American countries. My adoptive father has been doing some interesting translation projects in Guatemala involving the Quiche language, the Quiche Maya language, and I started tagging along with him when I was a teenager. And that was actually, in the beginning, it was during the years of the Guatemalan Civil War. It was the first time that I'd ever been out of the country, and it was a very formative experience for me. Later on in my life, when I became a journalist, and when I learned about the possibility of bringing the tools for documentation on those trips with him to Guatemala, to Tibet, to Africa, we started doing a series of collaborations. This was one of them. This first video I want to show you, we took very small cameras no bigger than this, flips. What were some of the other ones? Well, like those small, like iPhone-sized video devices, very cheap. Brought them down to this village in the Guatemalan highlands, in the Departamento de Sololá. They call this village Alaska because it's really, really cold. It's at a very high altitude. It began as a refugee camp after I think it was Hurricane Stan in Guatemala. So these people actually moved from a lower altitude up to this higher altitude, and it was a barren and cold and tough place. And eventually this temporary settlement area for internally displaced people became a community. And these emergency houses that were built by UN agencies and the government, they were never really finished. It was almost like a Hollywood set where you have these buildings, but there isn't the infrastructure. There isn't clean water. I mean, there isn't water at all. Like once every 3 days, there's water, and it runs for an hour a day, and it carries diseases because it's not filtered.